Hello everyone, hope you're all doing well. Today I'm in the F-16 Block 50 and I'm doing a rapid start because today the goal is to do an exhibition of the targeting pod with some LGBs. So I'm closing the canopy because there's a chap next to me who's going to get pretty loud here. But I'm skipping a lot of the usual pre-flight checks and setups that I would usually do and just getting on with it.
Request refueling.
First thing I'm doing is requesting the ground crew actually add the targeting pod and 4 GBU 12s to my jet. So I'll have 4 500-pound laser-guided bombs. So after initial startup, one would wait for the engine RPM to reach 20%, at which point you would put throttle to idle. And then now I'm going to turn on all of my avionics powers. That would be MFDs, the MMC, which would be the module mission computer, the F-16's mission computer, UFC upfront control panel, MFD multifunction display, data link, which would be the aircraft's data link, store power, and I'm also going to align or begin alignment of my INS, the inertial navigation system of the aircraft. And since I have my stores have power now, I'm going to turn on my radar altimeter, my FCR, which is fire control radar, and my right store power, which is the targeting pod. So if I go to the targeting pod page, I'm eventually going to wait and look to see when that's going to pop up. But in the meantime, I'm waiting for my INS to align. The left value is time in decimal minutes counting up, and that will hit about 8 minutes when we're fully aligned. And the right number is the alignment value, which was going to go from 99 to 6. So when it hits 6, we're ready to go. You could peace out at 60 if you were in a scramble situation, but we're gonna wait for full alignment here. And the lat long and altitude there, it was the system altitude. I'm sorry, the system location for calibration. So we just had to confirm that. And now I'm going through some other checks, setting up my radar warning receiver and my countermeasures. My chaff and flare, setting my stores configuration Cat 3, since we are in an air-to-ground loadout. And then we'll twiddle our thumbs to wait for the INS to come down to 6. But in the meantime, I'm also waiting for my targeting pod to pop up so that I can enter in the laser designator PRF, pulse repetition frequency, which our LGBs are going to be tuned to. So I'm using the ICP, the integrated control panel, to manipulate the DED, which is the data entry display. This is how you do a lot of things on the F-16. Radio frequencies, steer point manipulation, laser codes, for example. Setting up your bingos, bingo fuel, your altitude settings, stuff like that. So, fast forwarding. That was a fast 8 minutes. Our INS is now aligned, and I'm now adjusting my backup ADI. And now since we're fully aligned, I'm going to switch that INS knob to nav and request taxi to runway.
Colt 1-1. Request taxi to runway.
Which will take a minute because it's far and I'm not very good at taxiing. But as we go, I'm going to be performing some other checks, such as arming my ejection seat, checking oil pressures and things like that. Making sure my fuel is balanced. Another thing you'll see in a little bit is a chart that'll pop up, which will have sort of a weight versus takeoff speed curve. So when I was selecting my loadout, I was able to see my aircraft weight, and then I can look at that curve and understand at what speed I'll need to rotate to get off the ground. So in this mission, we already have some pre-planned steer points because this is sort of a basic mission. So we're going to be going through, we're going to be navigating through 2 steer points, and then our target is at the 3rd steer point. And while we're en route, we'll mess with the targeting pod a little bit. We'll find a mover so that we can show off the point tracking, the way the point track is modeled in this simulator. We'll eventually do our fence-in checks, such as our laser arm and our master arm. See, checking the chart. Refine our target position with the targeting pod. Release our bombs. We're going to roll 30 to 45 degrees to the left so that we don't mask the pod in the process, and lays the target when the bombs are about to the target, and we'll hopefully destroy the target. So right now I got the wheel brakes on, I got the throttle up, I was doing some last minute pressure checks. Going to disengage nose wheel steering about 70 knots to give rudder authority. So I'm in full afterburner right now. Rotate, get my gun cross, or bore sight cross, or waterline up to about 10 degrees. Retract landing gear when I'm below 300 knots. And we're on our merry way. So you can see that tadpole is pointing sort of up and to the left, meaning that the next steer point is generally in that direction if you were sort of looking down on it like your HSD or horizontal situation display, which we will have a look at in a little bit. But right now I'm setting on my autopilot. I'm doing a pitch hold for attitude so that I can continue my climb, and doing a roll autopilot to follow these steer points. I set my steer point nav mode to auto so that when I hit steer point 1, it'll automatically switch to steer point 2, and I will be on my merry way to steer point 2. I'm going to turn that off when we're when we're on our way to steer point 3, because I don't want the aircraft doing anything on its own as I'm approaching the target. So let's have a look at the targeting pod. Not soy, not sensor of interest. With the DMS down, I just made the targeting pod the sensor of interest, and so now I'm able to manipulate it. The inner box that you see that just has the 4 corners, that's the next field of view. So right now I'm in wide field of view, so if I switch to narrow, that's the area that narrow would occupy. So I'm slewing around right now. I'm in an area track, which would have been TMS right. And right now I'm looking for a moving target so that I can check out the point track on the targeting pod. And here's a train. Huzzah. Cycling through the sensors, through TV, FLIR black hot, and FLIR white hot. All of that is also performed via HOTAS action. Slewing is performed with the left thumb, which would be on the throttle, and it's sort of an analog stick that would control anything, or any of these displays. So if it's your radar, it's controlling your radar cursor. If your HUD is the sensor of interest, it would control the cursor on the HUD. And in the case of the targeting pod, it would be performing the slewing. So now I've reached about 17,000 AGL. So I'm going to set an altitude hold while still following my steer points. One of the ground checks that, or one of the ground tasks that I did not mention, that I think I didn't mention, is putting in the targeting pod laser code. I did mention that, actually. Never mind. So right now I'm setting up I'm in SMS, my stores management system. So I can see that I have 4 GBU12s ready to go. I've set them up to drop in pairs so that my roll isn't affected by the weight difference. And all that's good. I had gotten into air-to-ground mode prior to all of that, which did automatically change my display, so I had to go back into the targeting pod mode. But when I went into air-to-ground, I also went into CCRP, constantly calculated release point mode, and that is versus CCIP, constantly calculated impact point mode. So in that mode, you would see on your HUD where the weapon would hit if you released it. Well, ideally where it would hit, according to the solution, right then and there. So as you can see, I'm slewing around. I'm slewing my target cursor around. My HUD is the sensor of interest right now, as indicated by the asterisk on the upper left, and my targeting pod is slave to it. So wherever I move the cursor on the HUD, it's moving the targeting pod, and also there's a target designating crosshairs on the HSD to tell me where my pod is in relation to, or to where my target, my SPI is in relation to anything else. So that's SPI system point of interest. On the A10, I think they call it sensor point of interest, but it's the same thing. So on CCRP, constantly calculated release point, that, by comparison, is the system is providing a solution for when the weapon will be released. And that's what we're going to do. Just playing around with the contrast and brightness of the modeled display. So that dot that's getting closer to the crosshair is the SA dot. So this is where, again, sort of an HSD overhead view, where the targeting pod is looking in relation to our aircraft position. So here I'm hitting steer point 2, and I'm automatically on my way to steer point 3, which is where our target is. So we're still in CCRP. Right now I'm going to find the target, hopefully refine it, get a visual on it with the targeting pod. The vertical line that we saw on the HUD is the fall line, so our goal is to align the flight path marker with that line. So there's 2 things on the HUD. One was the gun cross, or bore sight cross, or waterline as it's seen in other platforms, and the other is the flight path marker or velocity vector. The one with the circle and the 3 spikes coming off of it is the flight path marker. So that is indicating where our aircraft is moving, and then the gun cross would be where our aircraft is pointing. So we want to get our flight path marker positioned over that vertical fall line, and when we are I think within like probably 10-ish seconds of release point, that thicker horizontal line that's above it, above the heading, sort of at 2.5 degrees right there, that will start to come down. And when it hits our flight path marker, during that time, as it's dropping, we are holding down pickle, the weapon release button. And when it hits our flight path marker, our weapons will release. And at that point, because we have GBUs, we're going to roll off 30 to 40 degree angle to the left, and hopefully our pod will not mask. And then that timer, so here's a timer, that 130 right there, that's time to release. That timer will then go to a time to impact. So then with 8 to 12 seconds till time of impact, that's when we'll start lasing. And hopefully get a splash at that point. So we got about a minute left before we will release. During this time, I've been refining my crosshair placement on the targeting pod, ensuring area track, aiming at the base of the target so that I can get a fine reflection off of it, even though when we're lasing it, it'll probably be hitting more of the top side of the target. But I am armed, my laser is armed. About 26 seconds to release. The gun cross has a line coming off of it that's indicating the general direction of the target, which is handy if it's off field of view in the HUD. It would also have a number next to it, which would be the angle of nose. So here comes that line down to our flight path marker. I am holding down pickle at this point. We have weapon release. And now I'm going to roll left. I don't know how hard this bank is supposed to be, but my goal right now is to not mask the pod because I want to be able to laze the target. And you can see that 17, 16, that countdown timer is going. So about here I'm lasing. It's lasing and showing the code 1688 that we had set up in the pre-mission. And we got it. So in this view, you'll actually see the bombs adjust mid-flight in response to the laser. Right there. And the pod immediately masked. You saw how quick that was to mask. So now our mission is accomplished. We're on our merry way back home. RTB, return to base. I did not pre-plan very well with fuel management and all that, and so I'm going to try to bleed off some fuel so that I can reduce as much weight as possible. And in fact, I'm going to, because this is a simulator and we can have some fun here, I'm going to jettison my stores over a lake so that hopefully no one gets hurt. Peace out. So now I'm positioning my aircraft to do an overhead brake landing. So I'm going to overfly the runway upwind. Right now I'm just trying to get in that position. So my goal is about 1,500 feet AGL as I'm going over it. Sort of aligned with it, and then I'm going to brake at a 60-degree angle. Wouldn't really matter. Well, I'm sure it matters, but I'm deciding to go left in this instance. So the G indicator on the upper left there, I'm pulling about 2.8, 2.9 Gs there. So this whole part of it is to bleed off some speed so that I can drop my gear below 300. And after I drop my gear, as we'll see on the pitch ladder, I get a glide slope indicator marker at about, at negative 2.5 degrees. So the goal is going to be to put my flight path marker on that so that I achieve the proper glide slope, and then put both of those on the point of the runway where I want to touch down. And I also want to adjust my speed and pitch to achieve a proper angle of attack. So it's a fun song and dance of getting everything to align and putting the thing on the thing, as they say. So I'm almost aligned there, and then I'm trying to reduce speed and pitch up so that I get the angle of attack, which is signified by that circle on the left outside of the HUD. And sort of hard to get fine throttle control on my current setup. Touchdown's going to be a little rough. And then my goal is to hold my nose for as long as possible, about 10 to 13 degrees in the air to get as much air braking out of the aircraft body itself. It eventually drops, probably around 90 to 100 knots. And then I'm continuing to stick back to get as much air braking out of the rear stabilizer as I can. Under 70 knots, I can engage nose wheel steering, start to wheel brake, and then I'm going to go park. Thanks for watching.